Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 21st Planning Commission meeting. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Roberts is absent, all else present in chambers. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Per the city's meeting rules and procedures, public comments are generally limited to 5 minutes or less time if a larger number of speakers is anticipated or if approved by the chair. I think we're going to keep it at 5 minutes tonight. Speakers desiring to answer questions should direct them to the Planning Commission, and if relevant, the commission may direct them to staff. Speakers can also follow up directly with staff during regular business hours with the city. Please file a speaker's card with the administrative secretary on the form provided at the back of chambers. During this portion of the meeting, those in council chambers are permitted to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Public comments for scheduled agenda items should wait until that time. So let's see. Let's open it up for public comment.
At this time, we have one person in the chambers. Danny?
Good evening. I'm going to wind up freestyling tonight because my phone won't let me go online. Whoa, this mic is hot. Now, this all has to do with planning and the mighty Munchkin, otherwise known as Diane Burgess. I'm sure you guys are aware that there is a recall effort. Now, for me, for Danny Dorman, I am a firm believer in our right to vote, our right to choose, and to live with the consequences. So recall under normal circumstances, I wouldn't even support, whether I like the person or not. This case is a little bit different though. For one, she ran unopposed. So unlike me, who wrote in Mickey Mouse, they didn't make the cut. And this body is very aware of the shenanigans that she has pulled and is pulling. We have the big, ugly brown brick building, which is going to be a firehouse that I hope does not become a city hazard. And now the one on Brentwood Boulevard, because we just don't have enough congestion in Brentwood. Let's add some more. She trapped you guys the last time, maybe not trapped, but limited what you could do. And it wasn't necessarily to scuttle the project, but make sure that the project fit the needs of our city. And she barely made it. If you see any of my rants on Facebook, I think that she burned up a lot of her political capital and her shenanigans and barely got the firehouse approved. I think that if the assistant fire chief had brought the information that he brought that night, I think that if Anna Marie didn't come in and use her, I don't know, put in your own verb there, we wouldn't have this problem. So with the congestion downtown, I mean, what are we talking about? 300 people, which means at least 300 cars on a space of land that without this building would start to open up as you try to go to Oakley, will now be jam-packed. And it's all due to her. Period. Dot. She hogtied you guys. She pulled shenanigans with the council. I always thought Cena was our biggest issue in this town. And it really isn't. It's her. So I urge those listening, because that's who I'm actually addressing, recall. If you care about, and I'm only worried about Brentwood, her claws go out beyond that. But for Brentwood, if you care, vote the recall. And in other news, I love Dame. That person, he, she, or they, I love their satire. I really do. And it is great because we are getting more voices and more eyes to us. And satire it's a beautiful thing. So with her and with Marie and so many others, we are Brentwood strong. Peace out.
At this time, we have no other speaker cards in person.
Thank you, April. Moving on to the consent calendar. Our next item is the consent calendar. We do not have any items tonight. Please note that the minutes from the March 17th meeting will be added to the May 5th agenda and will be approved along with the minutes from tonight's meeting. Moving into business items, item E1, a time extension for a previously approved design review application DR 22-010 for 8 semi-custom homes located on St. James Court subdivision. Staff report from Sarah E. Weiler.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Chairperson Brand. Good evening, Planning Commission. Before you tonight is a time extension request for the design review application 22-010 for 8 new semi-custom single-family homes within the St. James Court subdivision located on off of Minnesota Avenue. Here is just a brief aerial for a refresher since it's been some time since we've chatted about this project. And here is the site plan with the 8 plotted homes. Just to give you some background, if you recall, this project has quite a lengthy history. A simplified background is provided for you today due to the time extension requests with the full background in the staff report. In 2023, improvement plans for the subdivision were approved and on-site grading and utility work began. In 2025, the Planning Commission granted the design review approval with an expiration date of January 21, 2026. Per the conditions of approval for the subdivision, site work is required to be completed prior to issuance of any building permits. All the required site work was not completed and staff could not issue building permits prior to the expiration date. To date, utilities have been installed along the private street and the perimeter sound wall plans have been reviewed and approved and installation can begin. Given that the site work is still ongoing, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 26-008 approving the time extension for design review 22-010 as previously conditioned. That concludes my staff report. I'm available for any questions, and we also have the applicant here, Mike Moreland, if there are questions for him as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions of staff? Vice Chair?
Sure. Sarah, I was noticing in the staff report, there's nothing in there about what any kind of standards there might be for granting an extension on the design review. It's just, I went and checked code, and code just says we can extend it. Doesn't say for how long, doesn't say, if we can extend it twice, doesn't say anything. Apparently, we could extend it for 1,000 years if we wanted. Is there any guidance staff has as to what planning commissioners usually consider when they consider an extension?
Sure, thank you. You're correct. The time is up to the discretion of the Planning Commission. Typically, we grant a year or two extension depending on the project. In this case, we're recommending a 2-year extension, but again, that's up to the discretion of the commission. So I'll wait to hear what you have to say, but right now we're recommending 2 years. So a 2028, no, is that right? 2028 time extension date.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, would it be fair to say this project is actively progressing? Or are we still working through the later stages? I know we have the utility piece that you just talked about, like, are we moving forward?
Sure. So the applicant is actively working out on site. I'll turn it over to him for a little bit more information on what's actually happening on site, maybe just in a second, Mike. But as far as for plan check, the plans for the wall for the surrounding perimeter walls have been approved recently, like in the last, I would say last month. And then also they're submitting landscape plans to us. So that just came in a couple weeks ago. So they're actively submitting things. As far as the building permits are concerned, building permits have been submitted for the 8 homes. Again, we can't issue those until all the site work is done, but the permits have been submitted, comments have been sent back to the applicant, so we're waiting a resubmittal. So they're actively moving on different things, but I would have Mike answer any more questions for the on-site work.
Before, if we could, just 2 years, where did we come up with, kind of to Vice Chair Floor's point about how we determine the time extension? Sure. Where do we come up with the 2 years?
Yeah, so 2 years isn't uncommon. We've done that before, and I think in this case, we were just really hoping to one-time extension and be done. We don't want to have to come back again. There's been some things that have come up in the field during construction that have, prolonged things. Mike can hopefully speak to that as well, but the 2 years we felt, it's actually 2 years from the expiration date. So the expiration was in January. So it's at this point, it's about a little over a year and a half left. We just felt that was enough time to not have to come back again. But again, that's up to the discretion of the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you. Might have a few more, but I'll move forward and then we'll let the applicant speak as well.
Forgive this is ignorance. When did we approve this previously?
The design review was approved in January of 2025. So just a year and a couple months.
And from what I remember reading and looking at this, nothing has changed significantly in the from when we approved it to now, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's just a time extension request. There's no changes proposed at this time with the plans or anything.
Okay, thank you.
The only question I had, was there a public notice on this? I want to say no, but I just wanted to ask to confirm.
There's no public notice because it would be based on the design review application, and we don't notice for design review. So the time extension doesn't have a notice either.
Okay, yeah, I thought so, but just wanted to check. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, okay. At this time, the public is permitted to address the Planning Commission. Remarks are limited to 5 minutes per person, except for the applicant, who will have 10 minutes. Does the applicant wish to address the commission?
Sure. Let's see. The last thing that you brought up as far as the design review, I have been in touch with a few of the neighbors that had concerns about the 2 stories, 2-story house. Is that better? So they are aware of the changes. There's some privacy concerns with lot number 7, I believe, and one of the neighbors off to the side. So I've been sending him the updated plans back and forth, and he seems to be a happy camper. So there's that. On the construction side for the offsites, we've already started digging the footing for the surrounding wall around the subdivision. We already have the rebar mats on site, and we should be pouring the footing next week for most of the wall. There was an abandoned storm drain line at the front of the property. We found it when a couple years ago, when we crossed it, putting in the fire hydrant on the south end of the property, and then when we crossed the utilities right down the middle of the driveway. And it appeared to be an easy enough obstacle to deal with. So we let it lie until now. And unfortunately, on the north side of the subdivision, the storm drain line kind of goes out under the street. So there's been some discussion back and forth with engineering on how to deal with that. And I think we solved that 2 weeks ago now. So they're in the process of backfilling that. And then once that's done, I can finally get the curb and gutter and the street done and pave the subdivision and repave the portion of Minnesota, the grind and overlay. So things are definitely headed in the right direction, and I hope to be out of there fairly quickly on the underground side. And then the 2-year extension, I think I was asking for 6 months, but this project makes sense if we do it quicker than, stringing it out over 2 years. I like the 2 years just because it's, there's a safety net there, but there's no intention for a 2-year extension or needing one anyway. So.
Anybody have questions of the applicant?
No.
Okay, you want to share anything else?
No.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Open up for public comment. April?
We have one speaker in person, Danny.
(2006) and Bridlegate. That's when Bridlegate was first approved. Then it got an extension. Then it got an extension. Then it got an extension. Then we wound up in court battles. 20 years later, that monstrosity is going on. Now, I'm not accusing the gentleman behind me of being senile. I am saying, what's the use of having a deadline if you can't meet it? Now, the gentleman said he only needs 6 months. Honestly, I'm not cool at all with extensions because their thing ended in January and here we are in April. And this kind of goes back to what I mentioned before about how come we're not getting together sooner? Because this issue had to have been discussed before January. I can't imagine a gentleman going to staff and saying, hey, oh, by the way. But that's an argument for another day. Today, the question I have is, what happens if the extension's not approved? Do they have to go back to the drawing board and resubmit all the plans and everything? Because from what I heard, there isn't any reason other than not being ready, and not being ready should not be our problem. And the mention of the water, that was mentioned in 2005, or 2025. That was mentioned because the neighbors brought it up as an issue. The wall and the second story, that was brought up in 2025. And if I recall correctly, I thought that there was some type of proviso. And now here we are, April 2026. And it sounds like the issue is not anything other than, and I'm just purely speculating here, but I'm willing to bet, and maybe you guys will ask this question, how much of this delay has to do with the neighbors? Because they have been contentious about this from the jump. How much of this and the waterway is now just being discovered when it was brought up in 2025? I don't know why there needs to be an extension other than we haven't done our job up to this point. And that should not be a reason for an extension, especially 2 years. I would rather, hey, If they're not done in 6 months and they have to come back, then they can explain why. Because 2028, what's to stop them from 2028 coming in and saying, oops, we need another extension? That's what Sino did. And then on top of that, if honestly, I haven't heard anything that gave any rationale to say, okay, you need an extension. If PG&E didn't do the work, you need an extension. If the city didn't build any streets, you need an extension. This all sounds like it's contained on the developer. If that is indeed the case, then we give license for everybody else to come back and say, hey, we need an extension. Why? So please consider that. If you got, again, maybe I really don't know the answer to the question, what happens if this is not approved tonight? Because it's obviously late. It was supposed to be, deadline was January and we're in April. So it's already late. So what are the ramifications and repercussions? What if you say, no, there's no extension? What does that do to the project? And then maybe consider the 6-month deal. But 2 years? No, not that.
At this time, we have no other speakers here in person. We'll go ahead and go to Zoom. If you would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. We have no speakers in Zoom.
Thank you, April. Let's see, I will now close public comment. Maybe, Brittany, would you be able to respond regarding the process in the event this item was denied, according to Mr. Dorman?
Sure. And Sarah, please jump in if you would like. But I think generally the design review would be null because it would have expired. And so the applicant would have to go through the design review process again. That's Sarah, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, that's correct. As far as all the site work is concerned, that is previously approved part of the subdivision. So that work could continue and should continue to be completed out there. But as far as the design review is concerned, we wouldn't have any approvals for what the homes look like. They would have to come back in and get a new design review application from us.
Great, thank you.
Through the
let's see.
chair. Sorry,
Yeah,
Albir.
yeah, go ahead.
Just one point of clarification. With respect to process, regardless of what the Planning Commission decides tonight, the next step would be an appeal period for the commission's decision. So it could potentially be heard by the council. For example, if the commission were to deny the time extension request, the applicant could file an appeal, and that could be considered by the council.
Appreciate that, thank you. Discussion. Oh, no, it's a public comment. I'll now close public comment, and we'll move on to discussion.
No, we have to do a motion.
It's a public hearing.
This is not a public hearing.
Commissioner Jones, Johnson?
Yeah, or however you like, Commissioner Johnson. You want to start, by all means. I can be the last one. Okay, thank you. No, thank you to staff for just the report on this. Obviously, this has been a long process, and I mean, as in terms of what's in front of us tonight, I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward. I think the extension itself seems like, I think, a practical way to do this. Where I'm conflicted a little is just the time that has been spent on this project for so long. And I'm wondering if an appropriate middle ground, even being the applicant saying 6 months is probably all they would need, as opposed to doing 2 years to do one, just because, I think we need to, I think, would that be the 20-year mark on this? Yeah, so I think, that would be, to me, would be an appropriate middle ground, is to extend it for a year. And at that point, if we're still asking for more extensions, then we probably need to revisit this a little bit more closely. So that's where I'm at right now, but I'm obviously very open to my fellow commissioners and just, the comments they have around this, but that's where I sit.
Commissioner Johnson, comments?
I don't, I remember this from the last time we talked about it and looking over the report, the staff report, and seeing that nothing has changed. I didn't really get a great understanding of what the delay was that, brought us to this point, that, brought us here. But I am thinking of Mr. Dorman's comment. I don't want to be here 20 years from now. So I'm a little conflicted in one thing, and that I don't want to see this again. Like, I don't want this to come back. So I don't want to say, oh, he's overconfident and say, I'll get it done in 6 months. And then next thing I know, we're back here, So I don't want to see that happen. If we're going to get it done, we should get it done and get it done quickly rather than for your sake, money's sake, cost sake, and for our sake that, it's not dragging out. That's where I'm kind of leaning. I kind of agree with Commissioner Jones. I don't want. I'm scared to do 6 months and then you come back. So I'd rather be cautious and make sure it gets done. And if it's going to get done, and don't come back. That would be where I am.
Vice Chair Floor.
Yeah, thank you. I want to first off address what this is, and I think that this will help the public understanding. This is an extension of the design review. The design review is one of the approvals that will come before the Planning Commission on a project. It's only one of the approvals. As it happens, the design review itself has a 1-year expiration date on it when it's issued. And then it can be extended by the Planning Commission, and that's what I was talking to Sarah about earlier. The extension, which is I think in 17.820.009 in Brentwood Municipal Code, in case anyone wants to go actually look it up, like I did this afternoon, it says that we can extend the design review. And the design review expires not at the end of the project, but Eric, can you help me out? It's like when they receive a permit, isn't it, or something like that? When the design review has met, it's...
When would we consider it activated?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. This project is kind of unique, and it was brought up earlier how the map and the design review aren't necessarily tied to each other. Usually when the commission sees the development project, the map and the design review come in together. When the map came in the early 2000s, and I think it was approved in 2006, 2007, it was by itself. There was never a design review application that came along with it. So even without the design review application, if for some reason the time extension got denied and we never even had one, they could still proceed with the map and fulfilling all those requirements, doing all the utilities and improvements. And then at some point, a design review application would come in. So that's the kind of distinction with this one. For us at the staff level, the way we see it is to activate the design review, we need to issue at least one of the building permits for these 8 lots to essentially activate like vertical construction.
So basically, once they start building a house,
Exactly.
and that's how I read it. It was once they get the building permit for one of the structures, that's it. The design review is considered.
Correct.
It doesn't need an extension after that. So this is just a procedural thing, just to extend the design review. Has nothing to do with when the project ends. Has nothing to do with how long the project takes. It just has to do with when they get their permit for their first construction part, and then the design review doesn't matter anymore. It won't expire again. So having said all that, and having read the staff report gives some account of the difficulties that were encountered this year, and the applicant has given a further account. I'm satisfied that they're just being held up a little bit, that they do intend to complete the project. They're out there, moving earth. And so my understanding from the staff report also is that, or from the applicant's statement, that he was fine with 6 months, but staff wanted to go 2 years, just in case anything else came up. And that seems advisable to me. Well, I agree with Commissioner Johnson. I don't want to be back here every 6 months trying, if something did come up, and things come up, but I don't see any reason not to just go with the 2 years, and that's kind of the direction I'm leaning right now. Again, given that this is just one of the things that we do, it's not the whole project. It's not, I understand the concern in the community with certain other projects that have happened in the past where extensions have gotten out of hand, but this is just a design review extension, so I think it's fine.
Great comments. Maybe it's a good question for staff is, in the event, let's say, well, actually, this is a perfect example. Applicant requests an extension for whatever, whether it's the VTSM or design. How many staff hours? What's the lift here from a city perspective in order to put all this paperwork together, get it to a meeting, and then we vote on it? Like, can you maybe summarize that in a couple sentences?
I mean, time extensions themselves, just specific. It's not a terrible lift because the bulk of the work has been done. You're analyzing, new information that may have come in, but and there is a fee that's paid, so staff time is essentially recovered. It's not necessarily dollar for dollar, but it does take time. I mean, it's not really efficient, to be honest with you, but we process extensions probably a few times a year for different projects, so it's not really new to us, and we're used to them. Does that help?
It does. It does.
Okay.
And just, I think we've talked about a couple of different time periods here tonight. So I believe, yeah. And so as Vice Chair Flores said, is we're simply looking at the extension portion of this. The map was approved. The design was originally approved in addition to the COAs that we talked about last January, or 14 months ago, I guess. So nothing out of the ordinary here. So with that, I will look for a motion.
Okay. I make a motion to adopt resolution number 26-008, approving the time extension for DR 22-010, subject to, not subject to any findings, but, well, I guess subject to certain findings and conditions, I guess, but there's no findings and conditions additional.
Just to clarify, are you are you moving to adopt the resolution as drafted?
As drafted.
Okay, there you go.
Just leave it at drafted.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Oh, moving on to public hearings, item F1. Text amendments to the Brentwood Municipal Code related to restaurants, including those with the sale of alcohol for on-premise consumption. Staff report from Jennifer Hagan.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. Tonight, we're here to discuss the city's focused zoning code update, specifically regulations related to restaurants and the sale of alcohol for on-site consumption. This agenda item is related to Task 3 of our focused zoning code update. This task includes amendments to various sections of the zoning code to better reflect the community's values based on feedback from the community and the City Council, and include changes to some of the permitted and conditionally permitted uses throughout the city. On September 24th of 2024, the City Council provided initial direction on alcohol-related uses. And then of March 10th this year, the City Council was presented with draft amendments based on the 2024 direction. Staff is now moving forward with the recommendation before you tonight related to the restaurants with or without the sale of alcohol based on the final direction provided by Council. While many of our focused zoning code updates have limited or prohibited certain uses within the city, this amendment was created to allow for consistency across the city and spur economic development while encouraging a wide variety of restaurants and new code updates that will be more easily understood. The overall goal of these amendments is to reduce the hurdles for new restaurants and only require a conditional use permit review where appropriate. As proposed, the amendments will provide regulations only for those serving alcohol within 500 feet of a K through 12 school and with a sliding scale for those located near residential properties. The proposed amendments tonight would provide the following proximity standards. It would prohibit all alcohol sales within 500 feet of a school. Restaurants that are located within 100 feet of a residential property that requests to sell alcohol would be required to have a conditional use permit. Restaurants within 100 to 300 feet of a residential property requesting to serve alcohol would be required a conditional use permit only if they are requesting to be open later than 10 p.m. And restaurants greater than 300 feet from a residential property that requests to have on-premise alcohol sales would be permitted in conjunction with a restaurant. The proximity standards, it should be noted though, does exclude the downtown specific plan area, which would remain the same, the Innovation Center, which would remain the same, and PD 6, which is generally the streets of Brentwood and the Raleigh Shopping Center. Based on that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 26-009, recommending that the City Council adopt the text amendments to the municipal code, which would add development standards related to on-premise alcohol sales and change the land use classifications related to restaurants with or without the sale of alcohol throughout the city. And that concludes staff's report. We also have Perry Banner from De Novo Planning Group, who's joining us tonight via Zoom, who has been our consultant and helped us out with all of our focused zoning code update. He, as well as myself, are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have any clarifying questions of staff on this item? Seeing none.
No, I do. I just was checking for. All right. Jennifer, as I read this, it mentions that first it says within 500, no on sale alcohol sales establishment within 500-foot radius from any school that's licensed and operations as of the effective date of this ordinance. I'm not sure license, was that supposed to say in operation? At any rate, so it says, okay, you can't put one of these within 500 feet of a school that was there as of the date that this is effective. And then it talks about a new school is established after the effective date, and it envisions what would happen if it was within the 500 feet of an existing restaurant, but it doesn't really. This paragraph doesn't really include the new school into the group of schools where no new restaurants can be built after it's built. You know what I'm saying? I think that if a new school is built and there's not already a restaurant there, then they shouldn't be able to build one. And I'm not sure that this paragraph clarifies that.
Say that again. Just repeat what you just said.
No.
I wonder if maybe it's clarified more thoroughly in the resolution? Or?
This is the law.
Oh, okay. That's the actual BMC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Understand what you were saying.
I will.
Yeah, the way it is currently written, then any existing or new restaurants could still expand or go in with a conditional use permit if a school is established, if a new school is established. So it would still allow for a restaurant to go in.
Okay, I see that as a hazard. We'll talk about it in discussion. For Commissioner Johnson, what I'm talking about is the schools that are already there, but if they build a new school, I also want that school to be protected from new establishments. I'm fine with an exception, you know.
Okay, I'm gonna follow.
Okay. And I do have, I think, another question before I give it up. No, I think these are for discussion. Go ahead.
Commissioner Johnson?
So I just want to follow up because make sure I understand, because I think I understand what Commissioner Floor is saying. If there is a restaurant that's selling alcohol and a new school comes in, the old restaurant or the restaurant that was there is grandfather, correct? Right. His point is, if another restaurant within 500 feet were to decide to pop up, that restaurant, the new restaurant, is subject to this ruling, right?
The way it is currently written is that a new restaurant could still go in with a conditional use permit.
Within 500 feet?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not, okay.
Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, real quick, the 500-foot school buffer, then the 100 to 300-foot residential standards, is this consistent with other cities that you're aware of?
Yes, I have looked into it. It is consistent with other cities do have similar separation requirements from schools, from youth-oriented facilities, from residential properties, and so forth. It's at the discretion of cities to do so.
Thank you. And again, the kind of a little bit off of what was being discussed earlier, new restaurant comes in, the process is ultimately conditional use permit for any of these, even if they wanted to get an exception made for wanting to put something near a restaurant or a school, or excuse me, a school or residential housing, that is, or is it just off limits?
The school separation is off limits.
Off limits, right? Okay.
The vicinity to residential is a conditional use
Conditional.
permit.
Got it. That's what I thought. Just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Is that
Can
absolutely?
Ms. Haig, I just have one more question. It's going back to this. So let me just make sure I understand, because I think I do, but if there is a school, a restaurant cannot open, period, within 500 feet.
A restaurant serving alcohol.
A restaurant serving alcohol, excuse me. A restaurant
Correct.
serving alcohol cannot open within 500 feet.
That is correct.
However, if by chance there was a restaurant serving alcohol and a school decided to open within 500 feet, within that perimeter, another restaurant could sneak through that little loophole. Is that correct? I'm trying to.
Okay, so the way it is written is if a new school is established after the effective date, an existing restaurant may continue to operate and expand with the application of a conditional use permit. It does not say a new restaurant.
So if I understand that correctly, I'm a restaurant owner, I would have to continue selling alcohol, I would need to submit a conditional use permit once that school moves in.
No, you could continue your hours of operation, your existing operations, grandfathered in. If you wish to expand your hours of operation or expand your square footage, at that time you would need a conditional use permit. But you would be grandfathered in at your existing, basically, operations.
Commissioner Johnson, does that answer your question?
I think I can help.
Go ahead.
What?
I can probably help.
Okay.
Through the chair. What I said and what I still see is that this paragraph that describes it does not in any way take into consideration what happens when you build a school after the effective date and a new restaurant wants to come in. It's not addressed at all. That's what I'm saying is it doesn't say you can, it doesn't say you can't, it doesn't address it as written. And, Brittany, do you want to?
Well,
Go
so
ahead,
as
Jennifer.
written, it says no on-sale alcohol sales establishment shall be located within 500 feet of any school, public or private. It does not, in that sentence, say an existing public school at the time of this ordinance.
It says that is licensed in operations as of the effective date of this ordinance. It's the very first sentence. Am I looking at the wrong page? It says no on-sale alcohol sales establishment shall be located within 500-foot radius from any school that is licensed in operations as of the effective date of this ordinance. And that's where I'm concerned. It says the school has to already exist as of the effective date of the ordinance. Then it says if a school comes in after that date and is built, it contemplates what happens to the restaurant that's already there, but it doesn't say anything one way or another about whether a new restaurant can be built within 500 foot of that new school.
Yes.
Unless I'm reading it wrong,
No.
and that's why I'm turning to the attorney.
I apologize. You are reading it correct. If you do not want to require new restaurants, you would strike out that as of the effective date of this ordinance, and then it would cover no new future ones. The next sentence will cover existing restaurants that come in prior to a new school. So yes, so the one sentence does cover new restaurants afterwards, which if that is not what you intend to do or what you want to recommend, we would just strike out as of the date of the ordinance.
Is that clear to the commission as far as that seemed like a very key distinction that Vice Chair Floor called out here? If
I'm looking at
oh,
the attorney,
Brittany.
the assistant attorney. If you have any, can you weigh in on how you read it?
I just found it. So I had to scroll down quite a bit, but I will weigh in. I'm just going to look at it for a second. Yeah, I mean, I think that language, I think there could be an argument either way about intent, but the way that it's written, I could see an argument that it only applies to schools that are effective as of the date of the ordinance.
And in my experience, we'll hear.
At this time, we have no speakers here in the chambers. For those that are on the line in Zoom, if you'd like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. We have no speakers in Zoom.
Also, the city has received 0 public comments regarding this item that were sent via email or otherwise for our consideration. Copies of these comments will be made available on the city's website on the meeting information page. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
A motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. All right, any discussion? Anybody want to start? Commissioner Johnson, you've got your mic on, so. Sorry. You're welcome to start.
No, I don't have any problem overall with this, adopting this that the council has already done, except for what Commissioner Floor brought up. I just want to clean that up, that language. And other than that, cleaning up that language would be important.
And when you say cleaning up that language, is that in reference to the sentence substitution or
Yes.
that we just literally talked about?
So
Just-
that
just to be very
To be
specific.
very specific, that no new school, no new restaurant, serving alcohol after a school had been built would be allowed.
Understood.
I mean, that's Vice Chair Floor's. Maybe Vice Chair Floor has a different language, but I'm in agreement with that particular deal.
Great. Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting too, because I had seen some things regarding this, and I think there was some confusion too about this item. And how I'm reading this again is like, this is not a ban on alcohol. It's not an attempt to, broadly restrict restaurants. This is on-site alcohol consumption, essentially. So, I mean, I would say for most of the city, there isn't a lot of changes here. Restaurants that serve alcohol, they can continue to do that. They're allowed by right. And I think, what we're doing here is we're doing some very, targeted situations, which you have a project that's close to a school, close to residential neighborhoods, right? We need this. This makes sense, right? You want to have protection for those areas. So, and even in those cases, in some examples, when we're not, when we're not necessarily even saying no, right? We're just saying, let's take a closer look, with the exception of the school piece, of course. So I think this is a common sense approach. It's a good targeted framework. I think it still supports restaurants. It still supports economic activity, but we're being thoughtful about the impacts near the schools in the neighborhood. So I'm comfortable supporting it. I agree with what Vice Chair Floor talked about, with just the verbiage, just to make sure we're very clear on that. So I'm looking forward to that discussion, as in terms of what that might look like. But outside of that, I'm prepared to support this ordinance. Thank you.
Vice Chair Floor.
Yes, thank you. I do have some other items in addition to the thing about the school built after the date of enactment. The proximity, I was looking in the residential, but I really, there's 100-foot proximity, and 100 feet is pretty close. 100 feet is about as wide across as my front yard. It's not a very short distance at all. A very long distance at all. And in particular, I'm concerned about this close proximity because it doesn't include, for instance, a patio. It doesn't include the parking lot for like a standalone restaurant. These are areas, if you have a patio out behind the restaurant, that's also going to be a source of the hazard that the alcohol consumption will create, which to my view, it's not really stated here what the hazards might be, but I think the hazards of, having a lot of alcohol consumption might be noise and, general rowdiness, because people get in high spirits. Literally, they have spirits, they get in high spirits, and that's what that means. And so I think measuring it from the physical building, if you're measuring 500 feet, that's a good distance, and you might overlook the parking lot or the patio or the sidewalk, which is open, which we did during COVID, and some of the sidewalks are still open. So I really have trouble with just measuring 100 feet from the closest corner of the building. That was basically my discussion on that. Is 100 feet is too close if you're just measuring from the building, and I think 500 feet all around would just kind of cover that. And then if you had a 500-foot buffer and, gosh, they had a patio that extended out into that a little bit, then I think that would be less of a hazard. If you have a 100-foot buffer and you've got a patio that extends out to that, well, you're getting pretty close to somebody's house. You know what I mean? And the same thing in the parking lot. Parking lots, outside of alcohol serving establishments, sad to say, are often the sites of, disturbances. That's kind of how I'm leaning on that. And going back to the first point, as far as the location, I think Jennifer has a good plan here that as of the effective date of this ordinance, I think you should not be able to build a new restaurant whether or not the school was built before or after the effective date of this ordinance. If we want to, do we want to figure out some language, or do we want to send it back and have them come back with language?
Can you say that one more time, just so that we could really absorb
I
it?
think whether or not a school is built before or after the date this ordinance becomes effective, if there's not a restaurant within 500 feet of it, a restaurant shouldn't be built within 500 feet of it.
So the
And
goal,
I'm saying that this doesn't say that.
so the goal essentially is just to ensure that in no way, shape, or form there's ever an opportunity where this could be near a school. I mean, is that,
Only if the school is built near a restaurant. I agree with that. Like the restaurant was there, they built the school. What are they going to do? But if there is a restaurant there, leave it. But if there's not, and they build a new school, then don't be going in and building alcohol. And again, these are on-sale alcohol sales establishments. They don't even necessarily have to be restaurants, although that's really what a lot of the discussion is in the different PDs, because they're looking at restaurants specifically and talking. And they say if the restaurant is an on-sale alcohol sales establishment, then. But really, this as written, this applies to any on-sale alcohol sales establishment. And I'm saying that if you build a school after the effective date of this ordinance, and then somebody wants to come in and build a restaurant or any kind of alcohol sales establishment within 500 feet of that school, this ordinance should prevent that. And as written, it does not. So I want new language, and we can either work that out now, or I'd be happy to see staff come back with it, because I don't know how pressing this is or how tough. I think we could fix it here. I'm just deferring to staff.
April, could you share my screen for a second? So I believe if we just eliminate that second part of that provision, that no on-sale alcohol establishment shall be located within 500-foot radius from any school, public or private, that is licensed, except within the areas defined. So that I think covers current and future licensed schools. So that does not allow for any wiggle room there. And then the next sentence will continue to allow for the grandfather in of existing restaurants that are in operation at the time of a new school. So I think this would take care of what it sounds like your concerns is for this situation.
I do believe it does. I'll leave it to
I agree.
And if I understand correctly, the goal here is to uniformly address new schools with future schools, or sorry, current schools with future schools in terms of the application of this.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Any other comments?
And again, I would like to change the 100-foot proximity that's mentioned in the residential for establishments that are not open past 10. I think that should be 500 foot, as well as for establishments that are open past 10. And because they're measuring from the building and they're not taking into account the parking lot, potential patio, just the general goings on that will happen around, let's call it a bar, right? I think 500 feet is a little bit better mark to hit. So that would be my second point of discussion.
Sheriff Lowe.
Yeah, Commissioner Jones.
Thank you. If I may, the 100-foot establishment, where did that number ultimately come from? Because I like where Vice Chair Floor is going with this, because I mean, you got me thinking, Vice Chair Floor, particularly on the 100 feet, just because 100 feet isn't really that big when you think about it, right? So you've got my mind spinning now on that, and I'm just curious where that number came from.
Yeah, so just a little bit of a background. A typical shopping center, a typical commercial center within the city, outside of the downtown or what we're envisioning for PA1 and the streets, typically we're all designed in a way that have the back of house to the residential. I'm not aware of a single shopping center in the city that has a patio on the rear. We could definitely add in, I think it's, we could, I think to make it clearer that I think the intent is to measure it from any operating part of the restaurant. So although it does say building wall, I would definitely agree that we would want that to also include a patio if there were one. So 100 feet to any eating, outdoor dining, patio place that there could be the service of alcohol. I think 100 feet should be. Also, looking at just the general layout of the city and how shopping centers were designed, staff did simulated buffers of 300 and 500 feet. If you look overall at all commercial centers within the city that are within 500 feet, there's approximately only 3 buildings, not even centers, but 3 buildings that are not within 500 feet. So by extending the requirement to require a conditional use permit for all properties within 500 feet would be essentially saying all restaurants with the sale of alcohol, except for 3 buildings, will require a conditional use permit. And so that is where the 100-foot came from. We did initially look at the 300 and the 500 and determined that the 300 was more appropriate and still did allow some room for some by right. But the 90% of the city, probably more, all of the shopping centers, just because of the residential nature of our city, are all within 300 feet of a residential property. So that's kind of where we came with those original numbers. But yes, if you did want to go to 500 feet, I think it may be more appropriate just then to take out all of the red lines. It would essentially almost require a conditional use permit for all restaurants within the city that would like to serve alcohol.
Man, through the chair. In listening to the analysis there's a couple points. One is that a patio not being enclosed is going to be more of a noise hazard for buildings that, as you described, don't have patios. They've got nothing to worry about. What I'm envisioning is a standalone restaurant. And I'll just go ahead and mention that there is a standalone restaurant in my neighborhood. And I have no problem with that. I mean, I think that they're already compliant with all of this. Just because I'm familiar with that, what a standalone restaurant can look like in a neighborhood or what a person might want to construct. Not every restaurant goes into a strip mall. There are such things as standalone restaurants. And even when we were talking about a potential drive-through restaurant in a neighborhood over in Brentwood Boulevard specific plan area, there was outdoor areas for people to sit, and that was not an alcohol serving establishment. But the potential to take over a piece of a parking lot and build something exists. We've seen that, you know. And this is not, the other thing I want to say about it, this is not a ban. It's a CUP. So by making it a CUP, that gives the Planning Commission, any future Planning Commission, the ability to look at it and say, oh, you know what? This is, one thing. It's in an area where it makes sense and there's not a school, and it's an existing shopping center, like you say, or they can say, oh, look, this is like right smack dab in somebody's neighborhood. They're going to be more concerned about it. Maybe we should give this some consideration. Maybe we should talk to the people that are going to be neighbors of this restaurant. Maybe we should have them have the opportunity to come and have a public speech. So I'm not trying to stop anybody from having a business. I'm very pro-business, actually, but I'm also pro-residents. And I think that in order to establish a good, secure boundary for residents to be able to come in and talk about these things, I think I like 500 feet. And I'm open to discussion from the rest of the commission.
Thank you, Vice Chair Floor. I wanted to offer a slightly different perspective. I haven't quite heard this one yet, so just bear with me for a moment. So in listening to what council had originally recommended, and clearly this draft ordinance was brought forward, the idea here was to create a somewhat of a uniform standard across the city that enables a consideration for sensitive regions, as in this case, either residential or I'll call it scholastic institutions, right? Private, public, what have you. It, by my analysis at least, it crosses 19 total, I mean, it's either 19 or 20, maybe Jennifer, yeah, PDs total. And I read through every single one of them, and that doesn't include the general commercial as well as the downtown specific plan, as well as what is it, PD6 and the PA1. There's basically 2 that are left over that have some kind of difference from what we're talking about now. One is PD15, and I believe the other one is PD43. PD43 is basically, it says prohibited sale of alcohol for both permitted and from a conditional use permit. So in a way, this would relax, if my understanding is correct, this would essentially relax that in PD43. PD15, a permitted use is golf-related facilities, and I think we've learned that before as an example of typically a restaurant that has on-site alcohol is very common with respect to golf-related facilities, and that's consistent because that's in the neighborhood over by Apple Hill in District 3, I think it is. So, given that, it's in looking at all the different, and I can share this with you. It's a doc that I put together that has all the PDs listed out. But what I'm seeing is that it's not that. Instead of having a potential, like let's call it a future business owner, looking at all of the PDs and trying to figure out where would be the best location for their restaurant, you might even have 2 PDs next to each other. One has it requires a restaurant require a cup, and then the one right next door might be a by right. And so I think what this is really attempting to do is identify zones of sensitivity given residential and schools, and then just make them uniform across. So just, I feel like, at least from a business perspective, and I know Commissioner Johnson here is one of our more business savvy experts here, but I think it would definitely bring us a step forward as far as not only giving us an opportunity for a future restaurant with on-site alcohol sales, but also give us a bit more discretion, first of all, from this body as well as council to say, as Vice Chair described, having we'd essentially have this body would have that, be able to exercise that discretion versus, as it relates to a variety of variables that we typically see with respect to cups. But it would also enable that level of consistency. So it'd be a little bit, I would imagine it would be a little bit easier for a restaurant owner or future restaurant owner to look at that and say, oh, that seems a little bit easier because of the specificity of the PDs is slightly alleviated. So that being said, I can appreciate the push-pull of the 100 to 300 to 500 feet. I realize there's a lot of gray area there. So I think that judging by what I've heard thus far this evening, it sounds like that's where we really want to get a bit more clarity on as a body. So does anyone want to comment a bit more specifically about their thoughts and direction as far as that's concerned?
I have a thought. Okay. One question I have for staff is, if I recall correctly, when we were talking about drive-throughs, isn't it 300 feet for drive-throughs? The distance a drive-through has to be away from residential. Do we have I thought we had a ruling on that. No? While Jennifer's looking into that, something to keep in mind about a CUP is it goes with the building. So this is only if somebody has an initial intent to put something in that building that wasn't already there that involves sales of alcohol. And then if they receive a CUP, then ever after, that building is going to have a CUP on it that says you can serve alcohol here unless somebody else comes along, you know, in the distant future and decides they want to, you know, change the regulation or something. So I think a CUP is a pretty light standard for something like this. We see restaurants in here for all the time for all kinds of things. And if they're in here getting a design review, they're probably getting a CUP anyway. And if they're, you know, if they're not, they're probably getting a design review. It's not like they're not going to be talking to planning anyway in most situations that I've seen. I don't know. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think that that's only applicable to new construction. And I believe since, you know, 90 to 95% of the city is built out, that the majority of our shopping centers are not going to come in to the Planning Commission for any reason at all, except for a conditional use permit. And I did find the drive-through if you want, when you're ready to go back to that.
Yes, what is that?
Yeah, so per our new drive-through ordinance, drive-throughs shall be located a minimum of 100 feet from a residential property unless separated by a masonry wall, in which then they can go even closer than 100 feet.
I see. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Well, that was my input.
Commissioner Johnson? Or?
You know, as Jennifer so eloquently put it, most business owners and restaurants are going to be wanting to have foot traffic. At the end of the day, that's what we want. You want foot traffic to get people to see a restaurant. The last thing a restaurant owner wants to do is be smack dab in a middle of a. Now I know that in the middle of a residential area, because there's no foot traffic, I realize that that situation where you live, that's slightly different, but they want foot traffic. They want the ability to draw eyeballs. And most of our shopping centers is where they're going to want to be because there are other businesses located nearby that's going to be able to draw, draw business, draw people, draw customers. And then when you take a look at most of these shopping centers, they usually have a brick wall. And right now, the brick wall, right on the other side of the brick wall, is a residential home, which could be less than 100 feet away, even though there's a brick wall separating the property. So I'm not I think there's a good plan. I think it's reasonable. I certainly don't want a alcohol near a school in any which way, shape, or form. Kids walk, even though they can walk there, and ride a scooter. I get all of that. And even though that the restaurateur better check for ID because they'll be fined and lose their license to sell alcohol if they violate that rule. I still think it's not a bad idea to have that 500-foot consistent. But the increasing it for to put like restaurants, no restaurant, if they are the stupid, if they want to have a restaurant in a residential area where there's no other commercial activity going on, that's not a place that's going to be successful. So I'm inclined to leave it where it is, and that's what my thoughts on that particular part of it.
If I may, I heard something from Jennifer and from Commissioner Johnson that's intriguing to me about a wall. If there is a wall, I would say that we could actually add that in to say to allow to be closer if there is a wall. But I'm still leaning towards the bigger number. But I think if there's a wall, like I was talking about how a patio lets sound travel, but a wall can help with that. So I think a wall is a good idea.
And again, so going back, Jennifer, to what you were saying in respect to the build out of the city, 90 to 95%. So the likelihood of a new standalone restaurant in an area that falls within the scope of this ordinance is pretty unlikely. Is that a fair assessment?
It's not unlikely, but it's going to only happen in limited circumstances.
Right.
The majority of the vacant land that we currently have is along Brentwood Boulevard, which is not straight commercial. A lot of that is commercial/industrial. So we may not get retail, commercial, restaurant type uses. But the majority of the land that we do have left is typically along Brentwood Boulevard. Outside of Brentwood Boulevard, there is very little internal vacant land that we have left.
And to confirm, going from 100 feet to either 300 or 500 essentially would ensure a CUP for any restaurant that's looking to sell alcohol.
It would.
Given the current locations that
Correct,
exist.
yes. If you extend the 100 feet requirement to 300 or 500 feet, I would say 300 would encompass probably 75% of the city's buildings, and I would say 500 would probably encompass 90% and above, requiring all properties.
Okay.
To require conditional use permit.
And I think to that point, intriguing discussion going on to my left over here, particularly in relation to having the wall that separates a commercial building and residential housing. I wanted to discuss more a little about what that looks like potentially from a verbiage standpoint in there, because to Vice Chair Floor's point, I mean, like if you have a wall that separates housing and the commercial building, I almost wonder if 100 feet would suffice. I'm going back and forth because I get what Vice Chair Floor is saying, particularly on just being, very careful about, how we're letting this happen as a city. But on the flip side, I don't want to impede business either, right? And as long as it makes sense, to really look at it and make sure that the right thing is being done. So I'm a little conflicted. I'm open to hearing more about what that might look like, but the wall component or verbiage is something I think we might want to explore a little bit further.
And to clarify, it is a code requirement that there be a masonry wall separating all residential and commercial properties. So that is already a requirement within the city. And off the top of my head, I cannot think of any commercial shopping centers that do not have an actual mason wall. There, not to say that there's not an older one, but it is a current requirement and has been so for quite a while.
Got it. So that argument is essentially no need to put it in there because it already exists anyway, is in terms of when something is being built. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, you could still want it in there just to make it very clear.
Absolutely.
Sure. Just thinking about, for instance, the fast food restaurant that was requested to be built in a parking lot, and they were going to have an open area. And again, it wasn't an alcohol serving opening, but that one wasn't in the thing. It was a new building being built in a parking lot with an open space. And so, maybe 99% of the things that exist now have a wall, but that's not 100%. And also, as far as existing now, I'm from Orlando. Okay, So we went from 100,000 people to 1 million people in the 30 years that I lived there. I saw many things built, torn down, and new things built. Happens all the time. This is commercial development. A lot of times people don't want to keep their old buildings. And when you look at how a shopping center is constructed, they're designed, they're basically big empty spaces, and then the walls inside and everything is temporary. And sometimes it just makes more sense to flatten it and make something that suits the design that they want to make for a new thing. You know, it happens all the time. And we're not sure. For the next 10, 20 years, maybe this isn't significant, but I think in a longer time span, I just went home and to Orlando and had another look around, and I see change everywhere. You know, they say you can't go home, and I see change 50 years from now in Brentwood, and I see us looking at a law that will still be on the books. So I just want to think about the future, the present. You know, because there is another wrinkle. We have mixed use neighborhoods contemplated for PA1, and I think it's been exempted from this, right? PA1 is one of the ones that doesn't count here. So that's covered, but when I talk residential, I'm really thinking SFR, single family residential, and I don't know if we need to make that. But yeah, all good points, but yeah, just more to think about, lots to think about.
So I just wanted to address, so I don't know if we're thinking about the same property where there was going to be something with an outdoor patio. In that case, the whole pad was a commercial shopping center, and that was in the front of the shopping center. So this wouldn't even apply. Even if they wanted to sell alcohol, they would be way, way more than 100 feet away from the nearest.
Please
If it's
ensure
the
your
same
mic
place,
is
then
on
I
so we
don't
can
know.
capture
I'm
the
sorry,
audio.
Commissioner Johnson, in the instance that I'm thinking of, it was Popeyes, and on the corner they were at, the adjacent corner was residential. It's single family residential, as a matter of fact.
On Brentwood Boulevard?
Uh-huh. Am I recalling that incorrectly?
No, I don't think so. But I mean, I don't want to debate. I really won't.
I mean, the shopping center is here, and then there's a neighborhood here, and
There's a shopping center across the street on one side, and there was there was a shopping center across the street from that pad. I believe it's like Taco Bell was right there. And then on the other side of the street, I believe there was a shopping as well. The nearest residential was behind on the backside of that pad.
no, it's to the right.
I don't know. I got to look. I'll double
Yeah,
check.
I mean, for me, in the end, it's about, you know, is in terms of where it's just, are we addressing the school and residential housing piece? I think the 500-foot school buffer, very clear. I think now it's just, to Vice Chair Floor's point, what is the appropriate number of feet, you know, from residential. So, yeah, I'm still a little conflicted myself as in terms of what that might look like. The wall piece is something I think, again, since it's already in most places, but to Vice Chair Fuller's point, right? Things can get torn down, right? And can get rebuilt. So it doesn't make sense to have at least just the verbiage in there. I would feel comfortable with 100 feet too. I think if we had some type of verbiage that just confirmed that there was going to be something that stood between the residential housing and wherever that potential proposed restaurant is going to be.
And
That's
again,
my thought.
As Jennifer described the drive-through ordinance, it's not that it's 100 feet with a wall. It's 100 feet, but if there's a wall, then it can be closer. So, and that's what I'm thinking about here. We can say, if there's a wall, then it can be closer. But if there's not a wall, I want it like 300, 500 feet. So if there's a barrier, you know, that's going to keep the noise down and it's going to keep people from running in and out, then if that exists or if it's going to be part of the project, then fine, you know. And if it doesn't exist and it's not going to be part of the project, then I want the longer distance. That's how I'm thinking of it.
Great discussion. So I'm hearing a couple different things. First, just to directly address the point, Vice Chair Floor, it sounded like we're looking for, or maybe use your name, you're looking for some type of, we'll call it potentially adverse impact mitigation. Is that like a fair? And so
Yes.
can you maybe elaborate a bit on what those are so that we can kind of maybe, the noise I know was one that you had brought up. Are there any others that, I know because we seem a bit focused on this wall, but I'm not sure if, I don't want to get laser focused on a singular variable when there's probably more that are at foot. I know you had said about 500 feet, just the schools themselves, but if we're looking at a possible insulation / mitigation, we'd want to be specific to just encompass all the things that would be perceptually obtrusive.
And real quick, and just to, I want to be clear too, because everything I'm bringing up, and yeah, I don't want to get obsessed over a wall either, but the goal here is to address potential impacts before they become problems, right? That's what this is, right? So I think that's one part that could potentially mitigate a future problem, right? So I want to, before it goes over to the vice chair, I wanted to make sure we were clear on that, because where I'm going with my discussion here is just, I want to avoid any potential impacts before they become problems. And if we can do that here tonight, great, right? So that's where my head is at as we continue this discussion.
Certainly. As far as the adversity it's as I stated before, what I think the adverse impact of alcohol consumption in public is seen to be is loudness, drunken behavior, rowdiness. A wall would shield a residence from some of the noise, and a kid looking out their window or playing in their backyard wouldn't necessarily see people, whooping it up and getting drunk and being a bad influence when the parent is trying to raise their kids a certain way. So that's why I think that when I heard about the idea of drive-throughs, I think drive-throughs, the main thing is noise and, exhaust fumes and stuff. And so a wall kind of screens, and plus you don't want to look at the cars. And I think the same way, if we had a similar accommodation in this piece of code, that it would help businesses that are in the situation that Jennifer is describing. They're going into an existing shopping center. There's a wall behind the shopping center. The residents are already pretty well insulated. I'm saying if that situation exists, then, I don't want to penalize them. But if that situation doesn't exist, if there's not something, separating visual and audible hazards from drunken behavior, let's call it, then we would have a larger standard, and again, as Jennifer describes the drive-through standard, it's 100 feet unless there's a wall. And I would say it's 300 or 500 feet unless there's a wall or some kind of a barrier. And we're talking a sound wall, So I would kind of word it like that. And I think that would alleviate a lot of the problems for the existing shopping centers that just want to add a restaurant that might be selling some beers or something, and still would provide adequate protection in neighborhoods where somebody was envisioning something a little bit different, that was a little bit more open, and would create a little bit more of a problem.
I'm inclined to agree on that approach of 100 foot, there's a wall. If it's open space, there's nothing there, then I think 300 feet would be fair. That's where I'm landing right now.
So sorry, did you have something, Jennifer?
Just some clarifying questions, if I may. I know there's no consensus at this point, but I guess maybe if I'm understanding, maybe a suggestion where we're going. So currently we have 2 tiers. We have within 100 feet. Right now, as written, it requires a conditional use permit. That is with a wall or without a wall. as part of a condition of a conditional use permit, if there is not a wall, you can require it. So I don't think that the 100 feet as written would need to be required to be changed. I think what I'm understanding is then our next tier that we have is within 300 feet of a residential zone or use, a restaurant that is open past 10 p.m. requires a conditional use permit. I believe what it sounds like is if it is within 300 feet and is open past 10 p.m. or does not have a masonry wall, then a conditional use permit would be required. So if there is a masonry wall, you can go up to 10 p.m. If there's not a masonry wall and you're within 300 feet, then it require that's the distance, that's separate. Okay, but the distance is the separate question. So, but I think that's what you're going for is with 300 feet, it is past 10, or if they can stay open until 10 without a conditional use permit if there is a masonry wall. And if there's not a masonry wall, then it requires a conditional use permit.
Yeah, except for it's 500 feet. But yeah, that sounds like it would satisfy what I'm thinking. Commissioner Jones?
Is that consistent with?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're going with Jennifer's description as being our sort of source of truth at this moment. So I assume we all agree on that. Okay, great.
So that's the thing that we'll be debating going forward if anybody wants to. I'm feeling pretty positive about that approach.
So yeah, this is great. Thank you for clarifying, Jennifer, as well. I think we've been saying a lot. We kind of needed to rope this in a way that kind of put the rubber to the road so that we can be productive here. So we're seeing, okay, up to 300 foot, you might have a wall. Because like, for example, open past 10, that's basically the standard that we have for the downtown plan as well, where it's by right up to 10 p.m. and then after that you need a cup. So that's not too far outside the realm of possibility. The other thing too is it's like if we look, I know I've talked at length about this, if we look at all the PDs that are impacted here, I think it's like 8 or 9 out of 13 total are just based in residential areas as is, where there is no allowed use for a restaurant to go in, let alone some type of alcohol establishment. So we can kind of, a good chunk of them, we really shouldn't even, well, should is a strong word. It's not worth our time to really dig into that because it's a PD. So we'd have to effectively change the PD to really have to reevaluate our discussion here today. The remaining are mostly like, Southeast Brentwood over by the police station, the northwest corner over by, let's see, where Highway 4 gets off at Jeffrey. And then, let's see, and then potentially over by PD 55, surrounding Mary Casey Black. That's around a big residential neighborhood. So there's a few areas that I think we want to laser into specifically because those are the areas that I think are going to be of most consideration as far as a true need for a mitigation step as outlined in the 300-foot range that I think Jennifer just called out. So I offer that as a point of investigation. Maybe we can comment on those. And there might be another one. The ones that I had outlined, those are the top ones that seem to be blurring the lines as far as the need for this type of mitigation.
Yeah, commenting on that analysis, I think that's a pretty good analysis, but keep in mind, we're already talking about most shopping centers have a wall in the back between them and the residential. Whether, what we're talking about is only in a situation, if they're going to be open past 10, of course, but we're talking about proximity. And we're only talking about a situation where there is no barrier that we would impose what I would call 500 feet because that's what's already there. What I would say is, as Jennifer said, we could just say as well as if they're open past 10, or if there's no barrier between them and the houses. It just describes the situation, so it doesn't even contemplate Brentwood could change completely, and it just contemplates the situation. If there's no barrier, then we would want the 500 feet. If they wanted to build something new and put up a barrier around their, space to shield them from the residential that exists, then they could do that, and they could be within 100 feet. So, yeah, I see where you're going with your analysis, but I'm just saying, just in general, just to make a rule, I would say the rule would be if there's a wall or something, or if there's going to be, that's fine. If there's not, then there needs to be space. There needs to either be a wall or there needs to be space, and then everything else sorts itself out, in my view.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the methodology because I know we're talking somewhat in some generalities, but also we're trying to laser focus on this. And so my next question would be is as far as wall effectiveness, like I know it sounds a bit pedantic, but like we've been throwing out the 100, 300, 500 from a distance perspective, as Jennifer described, to offer some flexibility for economic growth compared to insulation from sensitive regions, I should say. How effective is a wall? And not from a question of like, is it effective, but more like a wall insulates X amount of noise from such distance. It's more of a science question probably for one of our planners or for Eric or somebody. But that would be my next question is like, do we have any evidence there to kind of steer us correctly of that kind of effectiveness, if that were a strong consideration for the 300-foot, reduction down to 100 foot with some type of masonry wall or something.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point. Again, I think I kind of go back to what is currently out there as is, right? With situations with commercial buildings and residential housing that are behind the walls. My idea of having the verbiage in there is just sort of be consistent with what is already out there in a lot of different areas in respect to the commercial residential separation. Does that make sense? Because that's why I say to keep that verbiage in there. Because to your point, how effective is it? I don't know, right? But on the flip side, I think there has to be some form of middle ground. But it's already in place essentially, so it's not like you're making something new.
I'll comment on the wall effectiveness. In terms of the visual hazard, children seeing behaviors, wall be pretty much 100% effective. In terms of the audible hazard, again, we have something we can look at, which is the existing statute that just passed, standard that just passed, that's regarding drive-throughs, which is, an audible and visual hazard for people. The squawk box and having to see the cars. So whatever has already been approved for that is probably what I would look at for this. And also consider that a patio is one thing and an indoor restaurant is another. An indoor restaurant already has a wall. It's the back wall, if it's backed up. Right, but if it's patio, it doesn't have a wall. The noise and everything is so an open space, as you said. So if there's an open space, then it needs some kind of protection from the noise, or you either need distance or you need a barrier. And as far as how many decibels are you going to get out of a wall? Well, we're talking about a masonry wall, so I don't know exactly. I've seen a lot of discussions about decibels in this very room, but at the end of the day, I think that a masonry wall of a given height, which that's what it is in the drive-through thing, isn't it? It's like an 8-foot wall or something. Is there a height?
I'd have to look.
So are you proposing that a new restaurant has to build a wall?
No,
or-
not at all. I'm proposing that if a restaurant is built in a space where there's nothing between it and a residence, and they put like a patio or something in, and if they make an open space area, you know, like a patio or the parking lot even, needs to be screened one way or another. Now, the building itself is screened by the structure of the building, but the parking lot and the patio are not screened. And so if it's not screened in any way, so as Jennifer describes, existing shopping centers are screened because they've got a wall behind them, usually between them and the neighborhood, and there's stores on either side of them. I'm talking about if there's going to be proximity to a neighborhood and it's not screened, then we would have, you know, the 500-foot. If it's screened appropriately, then we'd have the 100-foot.
So they would
But
have-
we're not forcing them to build anything. They can get a CUP, but they just have to be far enough away, or they have to put up some kind of a
Of a
masonry
wall.
wall. Yes. So that, but it's nobody's, and again, it's a CUP, so it's not like it's a huge burden. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm going. But I'm certainly not envisioning forcing anybody to build anything in particular.
And in your description, if I understand correctly, it's like if the patio components are of largest of concern, because typical restaurants would.
And parking lots, like if it's just for the restaurant, the parking lot. Because people like get rowdy going out of their cars and they'll stand around and talk and yak, you know, all hours of the night. But that's the 10 p.m. thing.
Understood. Okay, so following your insulation from the general operating vicinity of the restaurant, is that?
Yeah, of the what some people would call undesirable behavior and noise, and you know, so you don't have to look at it. Your kids don't have to look at it. You don't have to listen to it. I think that's kind of unless somebody can tell me what other hazard to residential areas is being considered in this proposed ordinance. I mean, isn't that what we're doing here? We're trying to keep undesirable effects of alcohol consumption away from neighborhoods, from houses. So, and that's all I'm trying to do. I've got nothing against restaurants myself, and I don't have anything against drinking myself. I drink myself. You know, I'm just trying to envision what the purpose of this is and how do we accomplish that purpose, and trying to be practical about it.
I have a question for you. So if a restaurant is greater than 300 feet from a residential property, and they want to serve alcohol, not past 10 p.m., just they want to serve alcohol, they can do it. Restaurants greater than 300 feet from a residential.
So I think I have just noticed an error in, I think, some of the language. I think we are discussing it correctly. The intent is that it be within 300 feet. In the staff report, it talks about 300 feet from residential. And within the draft resolution, it talks about 300 feet. But on the last page of the actual exhibit, there is a location in 17.695004B that was incorrectly stated as 500 feet.
Okay,
it was
going nuts.
described, and we've been discussing it correctly. And so I did just, Claire, I did just notice that. So we do at some point at the conclusion of this, need to rectify this to go one way or another. But I think staff's original intent and recommendation was 300. It was discussed with city council at 300. And so the 300 is what staff is recommending, but there is an error in one of the PDF attachments that does state 500 in one of the locations.
You know what?
Sorry, yeah. The attachment is 59 pages with all of the PDs. Yes. So that, yes, I think we are discussing it right, but visually, I think you two might be looking at two different locations. And yes, so that is what the confusion is. And I greatly, I sincerely apologize. But yes, on the last page of the actual ordinance exhibit A and B, it does say 500 feet, in which staff intended it to say 300.
And you're saying that your understanding from city council is that they were looking for 300 feet?
It was presented to city council at 300 feet for the reasons that I had explained previously, between the difference between how many properties would be encompassed between 300 and 500. So at the last hearing, it was presented to the city council at 300.
I see. So probably we need to make that fix in B in the exhibit.
Yes.
Since that is the code that's going in.
Yes.
All right. So 300 feet. And all right.
I got to tell you. I got to tell you. I am like, what? I don't want to talk to. We'll leave that alone.
I know. You're like, what is he talking about? And
But,
I'm
you know,
just looking at
this,
the
I'm
actual
like,
wording of the law.
I'm reading it here, and I'm like,
Good clarification.
Anyway.
Commissioner Jones, did you have a comment there?
Look, I would just say, you know, for residents that are looking at this, that are paying attention to this. I mean, I know we didn't have any comments during the public hearing, so I don't know how much people are paying attention to it. But I you know, the goal here is we're trying to be specific. We you know, and I think you need to keep in mind just my statement earlier that, you know, all of this is to address potential impacts before they become problems, right? And it's really just, again, it's about being proactive so that we
Need a break? Yeah, we can take a short recess. 5 minutes? Is that enough? Okay. We'll resume in 5 minutes. All right. Resume session. Okay, so we've clarified distances. We understand that, Jennifer, there was a bit of a confusion between Commissioner Johnson and Vice Chair Floor. I think we've agreed upon that. Now, let's see. Seems like our main contention, I've heard 500 feet in general. I've heard 300 feet and some question between insulation as a ancillary request, depending on that further proximity going in from 100 to, going out from 100 to 300. Do we, maybe we can start with this, so maybe to just sum up, it sounds like the 500-foot school thing, I don't think there's any contention here. It seems like we're basically all in agreement. As we move into the 300-foot, we start to get in, for residential use, I think that's our only consideration here, is that there's some consideration as far as pulling in all of 100-foot to 300-foot. And unless 100-foot, we have some kind of insulation that would be present to handle the mitigating variables that come through. Is that more or less in?
That's where I was, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I'm pretty much going in that direction.
Now, what would you, so we talked mitigation, right? So we're saying 300 feet requires no any type of mitigation. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think we heard a pretty good compromise from Jennifer that we could say in B, within 500 feet, within 300, it should say 300 feet of a residential zoning district or use and open after 10 p.m. or, how do I want to say it? Or within open space area such as a patio or private parking lot. We're you know, I'm trying to get there. I don't like the such as though, and I don't like an open air. I just don't know how to phrase it, but that's where I'm kind of going with it. If we just added that in.
Yeah, so if it's at your discretion, we either could do it two ways. We can do a red line and come up with exact language, or we can go with your concept and allow staff to work on it and then provide the final language to council. Right now, what it sounds like is that if there is not a clear, if there's not a masonry wall within a clear line of sight between the restaurant and a residential property, then it would require a conditional use permit. And the reason I'm saying it that way is because if there's a building separating the two or some other structure, I think that would also mitigate it. So it sounds like to me that if there's a clear line of sight between directly from the residential property to the structure, there needs to be a masonry wall. Unless, otherwise a conditional use permit would be required within the 300 feet, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, I think that's about it. Does that sound good?
Can I just ask a question? I'm just trying to make sure I understand this, because we're really talking about, I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, is a restaurant that is close, like, less than 300 feet, that wants to open less than 10, like is not open until 10 o'clock, because the way I'm reading it, from 100 to 300 feet, if you're going to be open later than 10 o'clock, you need a CUP. So that means what we're really talking about is a restaurant that does not or is not opening past 10 o'clock, correct? Is that what we're talking about?
Any restaurant serving alcohol
Right.
that is located within 300 feet of a residential property, would require a conditional use permit
Exactly.
if it does not have the clear line of.
But right
the site.
now, as it's written,
Yeah.
it says restaurants within 100 to 300
Yep.
of a residential property
Mm-hmm.
that want to stay open later than 10 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
has to have a CUP.
Yes.
And then it says restaurants greater than 300 feet, doesn't have the 10 o'clock in there,
Correct.
right? They don't need a CUP.
Correct.
So the only, way that this is going to take effect is if the restaurant is not trying to open past 10 o'clock. It's got to be, let's say they wanted to close at 8 o'clock. Then they would need a CUP because they were, let's say, less than 300 feet, and maybe they didn't have a wall.
Correct. So it would be 3 qualifiers. So there's going to be within 300 feet and open past 10 requires a conditional use permit.
Right.
The one that we are now adding is within 300 feet without a masonry wall, no matter the hours.
No matter the hours.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the existing locations, we thought we might have one of these establishments opening in already have a masonry wall. So it's not like it's a major addition. Like it's not going to, what I'm trying to avoid is, well, the way I was saying it before, if we went 300 feet for everybody, then people couldn't be putting these establishments into existing locations. But now they pretty much can. And this would only be in a very, very specific type of situation that basically may not even ever exist. But if it does come up, there'll be something there to protect the residents, that's all.
That is correct. Typically, the majority of our centers have masonry walls to the rear. What this is going to encompass is those corner type developments that have residential across the street. So it's typically going to be across, the residential would already be across a street. That's the only form that we would have that wouldn't have a masonry wall for the most part. In which the drive-through restaurant that you were thinking of, it faced a residential side property line. So part of that residential did have a masonry wall on its property line, but the front of its home did not. And so as part of that conditional use permit, you did mitigate that by requiring the drive-through to also put a masonry wall. And so in that type of corner instance where you have a residential property, typically it would be across the street or a lane or a drive-through. In those instances, if that does come about, then it would require a conditional use permit. But for the majority of the centers, the perimeter and rears of the centers already have masonry walls, but on corner type lots or narrow streets, it may not.
I'm starting to get a really better consensus, I think, from this audience or from us on that statement that Jennifer just made. I don't want to repeat it because I don't want to add more confusion. And so, I don't want to jump to conclusions here. I guess what I'm hearing is that there are those, we've added or we're proposing to add a third qualifier, that being some type of building / wall / structure that would divide a restaurant from some sort of single-family home or multifamily home, something like that. And that's basically it. Distances would stay more or less uniform, but that's the only proposed change. And I could be wrong. I want to make sure I'm hearing it right.
So can I just maybe, I'm not just, this whole thing with the wall. So I just want to make sure I don't want to mandate that somebody puts a wall there. If you're saying they got to get a CUP, if there's no wall, right? Like if there's no wall there, they got to get a CUP. And this would be for a restaurant that didn't close, that wanted to close before 8 o'clock, right? So it's like before 8 o'clock and there's no wall there, they got to get a CUP. Is that what we're saying?
Only if they're serving alcohol.
Yeah,
outside.
I didn't say the alcohol part, but yes.
Well, Jennifer, as far as a mandate, I just want to mention that we did just mandate walls for drive-throughs. So I don't think that's too unfriendly to business.
Oh, it's very, have you built a wall lately?
Well, and I think just from we'll call it a practical standpoint, I feel like we've got, as Jennifer described, the build out of Brentwood is nearly complete. Well, yeah, don't quote me on that, nearly. However, it's like knowing that on the practical side of things, it's probably a lot less likely. We already have what I would call, and this is my gross exaggeration, is like we already have pretty sufficient insulation from a number of other buildings. There probably will be exceptions, and I don't know how many of those might exist. But by and large, I would envision that these other businesses or existing infrastructure or something of that nature would already provide that type of insulation that I think we're after here. I mean, that's in looking at the map and everything, that's what I see, but I don't know, Jennifer, do you?
And to clarify, you are not requiring the restaurant to provide a masonry wall. What we're doing is we're requiring a conditional use permit. And so based on extenuating circumstances, if that restaurant happens to face away from the residential and there's landscaping or some other type of extenuating circumstances, you still at the Planning Commission have the ability to approve it without requiring a masonry wall. Well, go ahead.
And that's the beauty of a conditional use permit is it goes in front of the commission and it gives the commission, whether it's this one or future commissions, the opportunity to analyze the project, to look at it, to see if it makes sense, to see if it's going to align with where it stands. And we get, you get to put your whether or not you think it's appropriate or not, right? So I think we're on the right track.
I might suggest we start typing out a resolution because we're getting much closer. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I think we're getting a lot closer. And then maybe we all review it, and then I'd love to look for a motion.
Yeah, I believe I do have something ready, at least to start with, if you guys would like to share my screen. My version had the 300, that's why it's highlighted. That's something that we do need to take care of. It's not redlined because there was the discrepancy, but I did add this third option in, which sounds like I need to read over, but I believe this is what you were looking for.
And I presume we'd have a definition for masonry wall somewhere in the BMC to indicate that, like.
We typically do not.
Okay.
It's just practically speaking, our standards require a minimum 6 foot. But if it's an older one, it might not be. So we can definitely add that in. But a masonry wall is typically considered a block wall, and it's typically 6 feet, but it is not defined. So if you would like that to be more specific, we can definitely do that. But policy and procedurally wise, we would typically request it.
I don't know all the shopping centers in Brentwood and how high their walls are, so I'm just adding a touch of.
Doesn't the fence code say something about the height of a masonry fence being 6 feet?
It says that on residential properties, you can have fences up to 7 feet unless, I believe it says unless you can go higher with a requirement for a noise analysis, but it doesn't necessarily have a minimum.
So that doesn't help us here. And the drive-through fence, the drive-through masonry wall, is there a height on that, or it just says masonry wall?
I checked, and the drive-through standard does say masonry wall. It does not have a height or other specifications.
Okay. Any major callouts in looking at what Jennifer's just written, other than what we're seeing here?
I'm comfortable with it. I think we're on a good path. And again, just kind of going back to some original points, this is good. You know, when there's something alcohol related, I think it's important to be just careful, and I think we're doing that. So I'm good with it as it's written.
I mean, if we're moving and grooving here, I'll look for a motion.
I'd like to do it because, well, I don't want to forget that we also made a change farther up in the. So let me see. Here it is. I make a motion to adopt resolution number 26-009, recommending that City Council adopt an ordinance to amend the Brentwood Municipal Code, RZ 26-002, by adding Chapter 17.695, alcohol sales, which would add development standards related to on-premise alcohol sales and change the land use classifications related to restaurants with or without the sale of alcohol citywide to be amended with the changes that we see on the screen in front of us. Did I say it?
I'll second.
Oh,
Thank you.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that.
Okay, sorry, moving on. Let's see. Oh, gosh. Sorry, my red line is. Yeah, let's see. Informational reports from committees and upcoming schedule. Commissioner Johnson with Transplant.
Can we please have you turn on your mic?
oh, sorry. Unfortunately, I did not get to make it to the transplant meeting, but they did meet. Unfortunately, I had a work issue related, and I couldn't get there.
No, they'll be there next month.
Yeah.
Design review. I know you guys had a meeting.
Yeah, we did have a design. We had a design review meeting, and we approved a building with their designs, solar panel. Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, it was a residential home off of Windy Springs Lane, and we took a look at the application and ultimately decided to grant the exception, given just all of the facts that were presented. And that was it.
Thank you. Moving on to land use. Had a meeting yesterday. We talked through the funding for the priority projects. It's everything from the holiday parade to some of the funding of the harvest time trail maps and stuff like that. A couple of questions regarding what kind of requirements that will be necessary as far as like P&Ls and such. But yeah, all in all, good meeting. And then municipal code. I assume you guys probably didn't meet, but.
No meeting.
Okay, great. Requests for future agenda items. Does anyone have a future agenda item on the top of their head for a future date? Seeing none. So I will move on to requested items. This is for me, H2-1, future agenda item request from Chairperson Brand to discuss the possibility of modifying the notice of public hearing process. This is my request. And April, would you be able to share my screen? I don't know if this will go up here real quick. I can't. Oh.
No, but if you can email it to me, or email it to Eric and I can share his screen.
Yeah, just
His would be better because I'm the only person managing the meeting.
Okay. It's just a link, so you can click it and open it and put it in slideshow mode, please. Oh. Okay, thank you very much. So my agenda item is mostly related to this idea of public notice. As you all pretty familiar, we had originally started with 300 feet. We pushed it out to 1,000 feet based off of some precedent that the FPPC has made regarding our, as commissioners, possibility of influence on within 1,000 feet. So it's uniform to that. The idea here is that we would move to a bit more of a sort of a threshold or a dynamic breadth or width, excuse me, of notifications to the public. As you can see, I don't want to just sit here and read a slide deck, but essentially the idea here is it's like we want to share public projects with a wide enough community that is essentially dictated by the size of the project. Now, when I use the term size, there's a number of considerations that I've factored in, and I'm, as I'm bringing it to this commission, I'm certainly open to others. If you can go to the next slide, please. So if you kind of see what I'm, this is the first pass of ideas that I had as far as how we might use different variables to kind of steer us as far as what's important and what would size mean to a variety of different projects. Now, we've had a number of these that have come across the dais even in the last few years. I'm thinking stuff like big ones like Bridlegate or Costco, or these things are massive projects. And at the moment, we only have this sort of 1,000-foot window that we present these things. And to me, at least from my standpoint, we have a number of considerations that extend well beyond just a simple our tradition. I'm seeing this as a well beyond what we consider like a one-size-fits-all notification window. So as you can see here, I'm calling out stuff, everything from economic impact to a plausible circulation calculation, which is great because then we would be able to denote what that circulation, we don't have to use VMT, we don't have to use LOS, we can come up with our own methodology. Is it a conditional use? Sensitive adjacency, these are things that we've just talked about, as well as stuff like environmental or some type of density if it relates to single family home use. So this is the first pass, at least from my perspective, of things that we could use as guideposts to define this. I'm certainly not attached to anything specifically, but I thought that this gets the conversation started. There's a few definitions here that I think are important to bring out. You can see stuff like arterial location, general plan density. If you go to the next slide, I have just a quick glossary that kind of goes through. This is sort of my quote unquote definitions of what I've brought forward here. So, you consider what I would consider here is that once a certain quantity of these conditions are made, your threshold of communication would increase accordingly. So if you flip to the next slide, you'll see kind of like and this is, I'm not attached to this, but this is just a thought here, is that once we start with this sort of default 1,000-foot radius, we then would move to like essentially a 1 mile radius, and then our highest width, if depending on what type of project would clear that, it would be a citywide notification. One of the most common questions I get as a planning commissioner is, what is that thing on the corner of blah, blah, blah? They ask me because they just don't know, or they hadn't heard about it, or they live so far away from it that, they didn't have a consideration for it. So what I'd like this to do is hopefully expand awareness for projects. And in particular, I know Mr. Dorman talked about it as well, but projects in which we may or may not have much of a say, quote unquote, with respect to their approval or not. And so hopefully this would give us a bit more breadth of communication options to the community so that they're aware of the origin potentially of these projects, as well as how they may positively and negatively impact the community. Just to put this on paper, the next slide, that's the last slide I've got here, this kind of like ballparks it out as far as like what 1 mile looks like versus 1,000 feet. So it's kind of a silly visualization, but as you can see, the 1,000-foot radius is very narrow. And so when you start to get out to 1 mile, you really start to see the width, especially across the Brentwood city limits, as far as like who would be pulled into projects that we may have seen previously and may potentially see in the future. And obviously citywide and would be the whole city, but in this case, the call outs of 1,000 feet to 1 mile, this is the general distance. It's about 20 different little sectors out to about, compared to 10. That's the bulk of my presentation, staff report, I don't know. And so I offer this as I think what this would look like, and Brittany, you can probably help me out with this, is this would be something that we would present to staff. Staff could come back to us or to council with a proposal based off of this sort of direction with the, I think it would require the approval of council to spend time, staff, and staff time and money to pursue. But like I said, I'm kind of curious as far as staff's perspective.
Well, I'll give it a shot and then ask Brittany to sort of jump in as well. I think we've handled these future agenda item requests a little bit differently over time, depending on the nature of the request. Some of them have been required to kind of go on to council for that formal authorization. I definitely think this is one of those categories or types. For tonight, I think after the commission kind of deliberates and comes to a consensus, if the consensus is to move it forward, we could either kind of present it as is with some tweaks that you talk about and say, you know, here's what happened at the Planning Commission meeting of April 21st, City Council. How do you feel about it? Or if you'd like sort of more time to study and fine tune what you've kind of walked the commission through here, we could bring it back to another commission meeting before taking it to council, if that makes sense. Whatever kind of the commission's comfortable with, but I do think it's going to require ultimately the council to weigh in.
Yeah, that was my figure. I don't know, Brittany, do you concur?
Yeah, generally, I think there's a balance between, developing specific, policy, or if you wanted staff to spend more time and we brought it back to the planning commission versus, city council directing staff to spend time and resources on it. So just that balance.
Understood. Well, let's, I'll move on to commission questions. Any questions of the material you just saw?
I would note that it's all very preliminary, and I don't know if it's ready to send to council yet for consideration. My own view is that we're better off sending them a fairly complete package. I'm pretty clear about that in the past. So I was sitting here running through my head. One thing we could consider is maybe doing an ad hoc committee to flesh it out, but that would require public meetings, and there's time and expense involved in staff. So I don't know how else to approach it to where we could work through it, or we can just discuss it in a meeting like tonight. We could start discussing it, or we could have it put on the agenda for us to discuss it as a committee of the whole, just something like that. But I think it needs more before it goes forward. Would be my. I really love the idea, by the way. I think it's great, but I just think it needs more.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to going back to the drawing board, kind of taking this another stab at this, but yeah, I would agree. I don't think it's ready for council yet. I wanted to make sure that this commission got a chance to look at it and kind of get a sense of what my intent here is. And then, I'm strongly encouraging and inviting your input on it so that we get a bunch of different perspectives that are unique enough to make sure it's crafted in a way that's a group effort. So if, I don't know, sorry, any other questions?
Yeah, I like the idea too. I mean, I think essentially the goal is to open up the door for just more resident feedback and to expand the the footprint when projects are being considered. I would suggest, I think, yeah, I mean, just having this be an agenda item at a future meeting and having a discussion around, what this might look like, and then being able to put it in front of the council once we think it is ready. Because I mean, like initial questions I'm looking at is when you see like you got holding town halls, things like that, like who runs that, what does that look like, just kind of all those things that sort of stand out. So, I would say let's just put this on an agenda and let's hash it out. Thank you.
You did a lot of work, so you should be commended for doing all that work. That's number one. I did have several questions about, cost, time, who's going to do it, who's going to, who's going to make sure the town hall was held, was it held? How are we going to communicate it? But I think the intent is very good and strong, and I like that. I do think we should put it on us. I think it's going to take more time than we think to dig through. You had like some charts in there. I was just trying to follow along with the charts and all that sort of stuff. I think we need some more analysis. So I think we need to spend some time on it. If we're going to do it, you got to do it right. So that would be my comments on it.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that statement. Let's see, I think, let's see. So if we were to bring this back at a later date, we might need to work with Eric and staff as far as, like, I was thinking, let's see, today's the 21st, maybe like, I want to say like the first meeting in June, maybe? I don't know. Gives me another like 6 weeks to work on this.
I have a couple of thoughts, but
Sure.
can we go to see if we have any public comment first, and then that we can kind of wrap up with next steps?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and open up to public comment. Anybody on Zoom, April?
There's no one here. And on Zoom, if you'd like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And we have no one in Zoom.
Okay. Go ahead and close public comment. So, Eric.
Yeah, so it sounds like there is consensus and interest from the commission to continue discussing the item. To Chairperson Brand's point, I do think sometime in June would be appropriate. I would probably say the second meeting in June, just to give us a couple of months. And what I would suggest, and I want Brittany to weigh in on this because I don't want to get afoul of the Brown Act, but one thought I had was, since the rest of the commission just got the benefit of the presentation quickly tonight, I could send it, you send it to me via email, right? I could send it to the rest of the commission, including Commissioner Roberts, who's absent, and say, this is the presentation that was referenced on April 21st. Please review and provide me with some initial feedback. And then when we put it back on the agenda and we put the report together, I can kind of summarize, some of the feedback that was presented so that it at least focuses the discussion a little bit and maybe makes that June discussion a little more efficient. Does that?
Absolutely.
Brittany, I want to know if that sounds okay.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Otherwise, without it, we might run into the same issue now that we don't know what to notice. So,
and then the other thing, if we, the staff reports, of course, get published with the agenda packet. So then at that point, before the meeting, the public has the benefit of not only the presentation, but the feedback and all the summaries to date. And they might want to weigh in more so than they did tonight, which was not at all. So again, just a thought, if the commission's comfortable with that, we can certainly do that, but I'm open to other suggestions as well.
No, I agree. I think bringing it back at a later date with, obviously there's more work that needs to get done here, but providing it then to the public in advance, that way they have a chance to weigh in on it before the discussion. We take discussion notes that arise out of that presentation sharing, and then we discuss at the end of June, I think. And I don't think we need a motion for that because I'm just going back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could just, if the commission is again comfortable with that direction, you could make just a quick motion. That's the way we have it set up on the agenda, at least tonight, for kind of, just so it's documented that that's the formal consensus. I mean, that's what I've been hearing, but if you could just make a quick motion in that sense, that would help.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to request that, myself, Chairperson Brand, will continue to work on this, this proposal, as I will work with city staff to bring it back to this commission at a later date, presumably June, to then present again to the commission, as well as to solicit public feedback.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, let's see. The next regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for May 5th, 2026 at 7 p.m. and will be held here at the council chambers located at 150 City Parkway. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.